Hello, my beautiful friends. I am Bleadon-Maffei with Illuminating Souls, welcoming you to this episode of Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, a podcast designed to help you rest, relax, and fall asleep, all while deepening in your connection with your beautiful team of angels who love you so. I am an angelic practitioner, a spiritual teacher, and an encourager of souls. And I just love the work that I get to do in the world. I facilitate one-on-one angel sessions. I offer soul mentoring and a variety of classes designed to inspire your spirit. And you can learn more at my website, illuminatingsouls.com, where you can also sign up for my mailing list. I offer a new class about every 6 weeks or so. I try to mix it up, so there will always be something interesting for you to join in on. My classes tend to be small, so you'll have plenty of time to connect with others who love this work and love connecting with the angels. So swing on by my website when you get a chance and make sure you're on my mailing list. But for now, the angels and I are here to co-create a beautiful space of sanctuary and love, where you can rest, replenish, and connect with the divine support that is here for you. Plus, get a wonderful bedtime story to help you drift off. As I record this, it is early morning. The sun is just getting ready to rise, and that means the birds in the neighborhood are singing the sun awake. So you will hear bird song at some point, likely in the next hour. And so just go with it if you hear it. If there's anything louder than that, I will edit it out so it does not disturb your sleep or your rest. So this podcast is a mashup of two of my favorite forms of self-care. I have more than just these two, but these two I weave into this podcast, which are connecting with the angels and also listening to a sleep podcast, which I do every single night. As of this recording, the sleep podcast that I am listening to is The Sleepy Bookshelf, and its host Elizabeth is presently reading The Enchanted April. I think it must take place in the 1800s or the early 1900s. I'm not really quite sure, but these two women who are in England, each of them read this advertisement for a castle or a villa in Italy that sounds just lovely. And the two women don't know each other well, but they decide that they are going to go in on a month's rental in this villa, and two other women join in with them. And honestly, I have not gotten very far in the podcast because I keep falling asleep. I've been trying to listen to the first episode for a couple nights now because I actually couldn't get through the first episode to start with. And so I skipped ahead. And now I'm so enchanted, I really want to hear the whole thing. So it works because I keep falling asleep and I have to keep going back to see how much of the episode I remember. So I love sleep podcasts. I have a wonderful relationship with them. And I also listen to this one. I love listening to my own sleep podcast because I'm creating just what I would want to listen to, which is nice. This podcast has two components. The first one is this one, where usually we'll talk about something on our spiritual journey. I'll bring in the angels for you. And then the second part is when I tell you a story, maybe from my own life, or I read to you something that's in the public domain, or I mix up the two. I know for some of you, you have shared with me that your favorite part is this first part when I bring in the angels. Others of you have told me that you love the stories, and you have shared with me what some of your favorite kinds of episodes are. A lot of times when I listen, I go right to the story time. I love the part with the angels, but I do that every day, so I love to go to the story time because it makes it easier for me to drift off. So however you are guided to use this podcast, you have my heartfelt blessing. Whether you listen to it during the day so it can keep you company, or you use it as a sleep aid. I am just grateful to have this time with you. A couple of housekeeping things, just because I don't ask very often, I just thought I would put it out there. If you are enjoying the podcast, if you would consider leaving a review on iTunes, that would be awesome. Or sharing the podcast with a friend. We are growing through word of mouth. And then, you may not have noticed yet, but I have recently uploaded all of the episodes to YouTube. YouTube is getting in the podcasting business, and I'm not quite sure how it all works, but if you go to YouTube and you search for Sleepy Bedtime Blessings podcast, you will find this podcast there. And if you will subscribe to it on YouTube, that would be terrific. If you search for just Sleepy Bedtime Blessings, it might not give you this podcast yet. There's a bunch of other things it pulls up, so make sure you ask for Sleepy Bedtime Blessings podcast, and then hopefully you will see this show up on your feed on YouTube. You know, I haven't really had the energy or the impetus to market this in traditional ways, so I'm just asking the angels to be my marketing committee and you. So wherever you consume this podcast, leave a review, subscribe, like all that good stuff. Just interact with it, and I would be very grateful. So thank you. So now about the angels. Let's bring them in. I don't know about you, but this energy is so interesting. As I record this, it is mid-April 2023. And I really don't know what to make of this energy. I have felt tired. I have felt like my head is in the clouds. You know that term when, for me, I just don't feel terribly grounded. I don't feel focused. I'm so contented to do absolutely nothing. Between you and me, I love not doing anything. I have always loved not doing anything. Just kind of wandering through my day, doing whatever sounds good in that moment. I love not having an agenda or having a to-do list. You know that old adage that says if you want something done, give it to a busy person? I think there's a lot of truth in that because I don't know how productive I am, and I'm really okay with that. Anyways, I don't know what that has to do with the angels right now. I was talking about the energy, and I am just floating. When I used to swim, it makes it sound like I was a competitive swimmer, and I never was. I mean, when I used to go to the pool when I was younger, I loved to float. I love the feeling of floating and having my body be held aloft by the water and feeling the currents of the water moving me. And if I was outside, getting to look up at the sky and the clouds while I floated. It is so lovely to float. And I feel like this energy right now is inviting us to float. There's this wonderful card in the Osho Zen Tarot deck that I've shared with you about before. It is called the No-Thingness card. It's a play on the word nothingness, but it says No-Thingness. And it's an entirely black card, which on the surface may seem ominous because all of the other cards have these beautiful, colorful, vibrant illustrations. And then you have this black card. It says No-Thingness. But the beauty of the card is what it represents is that space in between breaths. That moment of stillness right before a new universe is created. And I find these experiences of no-thingness to be so powerful because there is this stillness. It's a stillness often, I experience it anyways, within myself. As someone who has always struggled with productivity to be productive, I often judge these times of no-thingness, that I'm unfocused or lazy, I'm not getting enough done, and usually it's because I have received an energetic invitation to float for a little while and allow myself to receive the buoyancy of this moment as I watch the clouds go by. Because sometimes we need time to be in the pause. We need to be in that place in between while we acclimate to all that has transpired. And we come into relationship with that which is being born. And this is what this energy feels like to me. So if you are finding that you are not incredibly productive right now, if you're feeling a bit overloaded and you're not sure what to do next, give yourself permission to be in the no-thingness, to be in the space in between while we get recalibrated. So now feels like a wonderful time to bring the angels in. They're already here, but I love the ritual of bringing them in with you. So, my dears, I invite you to get really comfortable in whatever way you can and to take some nice deep breaths in and out as we gently call ourselves forward into the heart of God. And beautiful angels on high, I invite you to join us here. And I ask you to infuse this broadcast with waves of love, waves of understanding, waves of healing, and waves of light and service to our beloveds who are with us now. I ask that you bring in a gentleness to help us be present in the circumstances of our lives with a gentle focus so that we can bring in peace of heart, knowing that this moment right here and right now is blessed with divine love. So, dear ones, just take some nice deep breaths in and out. And imagine Visualize allowing it to be so that your angels are filling the space you are in with a soft pink light that is filled with divine love that has been calibrated just for you. That in this moment, everything you are is loved. You are precious in this world. And your angels are helping to clear away your fears and your doubts. Helping to clear your energy field of anything that does not belong to you. Anything that is no longer serving your highest and best good. And just breathe as the angels infuse you with this beautiful light. And this beautiful light can expand to those you love. And you don't have to expand it. The angels will do it for you. So if there are any prayers that are in your heart for those you love, just place them into the light. And the angels will expand the light wherever it is needed. And the angels are asking you to be gentle with yourself right now. There's more transpiring than you know. And what they mean by that is we are multidimensional beings and we experience linear time multidimensionally. So there are the things that you are aware of in your life right now. But we are also moving through a time of expanded consciousness that is happening on the astral realm. So we are not consciously aware of what is transpiring. But it's almost as if our operating systems are being upgraded. And it takes time to acclimate to these changes. So if you are feeling that you're a little unfocused, if you are wanting to float, as I mentioned earlier, the angels say that's okay. It does not mean that you are not on purpose. There are times of deep productivity and there are times for quiet. And right now is one of those quiet times, even if you are super busy. You just may feel that you're ready to rest. And to not worry about that. It's okay. It's okay. Your energy will return to you soon. There are new adventures that are being born for you. So take a deep breath in and feel how much love is here for you. That there are sparks of inspiration that are being seeded in your name. New adventures are being born for you. This life is filled with joy and love for you. So take a deep breath in all the way down to your solar plexus and release. Release and know that your prayers and intentions and hopes and dreams are heard loudly in this universe. And your angels are watching over you and supporting you in ways you cannot even begin to imagine. And while you rest, your angels are going to take good care of you. While you dream and you're on the astral realm, you will have the opportunity to come into brighter consciousness So perhaps you will awaken tomorrow morning or the next time you awake with more inspiration and insight and on purposeness and the right time and space. So don't worry so much. The angels have your back and they're taking really good care of you. And so, my beautiful ones, you rest. And if you are ready to drift off to sleep, give yourself permission to do so. And while you do, we're going to go to story time. And I'm going to read to you and share some stories with you. So for tonight's story time, I'm guided to share with you about one of my favorite places in Los Angeles, which is the Huntington Library. To call it a library does not begin to describe the magnificence and the magnitude of this place. I first found out about the Huntington Library from my mom. She was coming to visit me, and this would have been in the late 80s. So I would have been in my 20s, my late 20s. At the time, I found value in places like Spago and glitz and glamour, and my mom was coming to visit me, which I was really looking forward to. And she kept talking about how she wanted to go to the Huntington Gardens, because a huge part of the Huntington Library are its botanical gardens, which never really held a lot of appeal for me, especially at that age stage. And I just sort of did an inner eye roll, and I thought this was something boring my mother wanted to do, but she was coming to visit me, and so we would go. And so I probably grudgingly and not at all graciously set it up for us to go to the Huntington Library and Gardens. I really had no idea how beautiful it would be, and that it would start this love affair for me of this place. So it's in San Marino, which is right next to Pasadena. If you know anything about LA, that's where it's located. And let me just say, if you live in that area or you're visiting and you've never gone, it is absolutely worth your time to go. So, for story time, I'm going to share with you about the Huntington Library and Gardens. I'm going to read to you some articles that I found from the early 1900s when it was just getting started. And so we'll take an adventure together. I guess I'll first start off by sharing with you about some of my favorite experiences of the Huntington. So Los Angeles is very urbanized. Real estate is very expensive, and so it is not easy to find wide expanses of nature in Los Angeles. I mean, you can go hiking up in the mountains, you can make it to the beach, but it's very, very crowded. The library and gardens are set on hundreds of acres, and there are different gardens: a rose garden, a Japanese garden, a lily pond, and just as an aside, can you hear the birds? So lovely. Makes me it's such a happy sound. So if you hear them, it's just perfect because we're talking about botanical gardens. And one of the things that I loved so much were huge rolling hills of beautifully manicured grass. With the drought and everything, I don't know if that's still the case, but back when I used to visit, there were just lots of green grass, which we didn't see very often in Los Angeles unless you went to a golf course. And then there are different buildings for various exhibits. the Huntington Library itself is a world-famous research library. Many rare manuscripts, lots of research material. And then there are the paintings that are in the art galleries. And then there's the rare furniture in another gallery. And just so it's this feast for the senses. So on a warm day, you can be outside in the gardens. And then if you need air conditioning, you can go inside and look at rare manuscripts or paintings. And I will also say, since you know that I'm heavily imprinted with food, they have an amazing tea garden where you can go and have high tea, which was always one of my favorite things to do, was to go and have high tea at the Huntington and then spend the rest of the day wandering in and out of the various buildings and exhibits and gardens. And it's a real feast for the senses. So one of my favorite places to go when I'm in Los Angeles. I haven't been there in many years, but hopefully I'll get to go again at some point. So if you are going to Los Angeles and you're looking for just a really magnificent adventure, I highly recommend going to the Huntington. So I have quite a few articles to pick from. I'm going to start with one that was published in 1922 in a publication called The World's Work. I don't really know what that publication is, but it had this article that I'm going to share with you. So it's called The Treasures of Time, What Henry E. Huntington Has Given the People of Literature and Art of the Past and Present. And this is written by Wilbur Hall. I also should add in, and this will come out in the articles, that Henry E. Huntington was a railroad magnate, and he was a collector. He spent a vast amount of his fortune creating these libraries, and he wanted to create this space where the public could come, where they could research, and they could see beauty. And so this is part of his legacy, which I think is so remarkable. So here we go. I'll read to you this article. On a sloping hillside overlooking the San Gabriel Valley in Southern California, in a simple, permanent, classic building, which is not simple anymore, there is, well, maybe it is still simple, but I think of it as majestic. So I don't know if they're referring to the buildings that are still there, because in 1922, this was still pretty early on. One of the other articles I have is from 1919, and it was just getting started. So I don't know where this is in the life cycle of the birth of the Huntington. So, sorry, I digress. Let's go back. So in a simple, permanent, classic building, there is beginning to take form what must grow to be one of the fountainheads of cultural information of America, and one that will stand comparison someday with any in the world. It is 3,500 miles from Boston and half around the world from Athens, Heidelberg, Paris, and Oxford and Cambridge. But scholars are already looking westward, and some of them even now making inquiry at the nearest transportation offices as to the fares, tariffs, rates, and schedules to San Marino. The Henry E. Huntington Library and Art Gallery is a title meaning little to the average man. If anything, he is likely to have heard of it as a repository of the best copy of Gutenberg's first Bible, or of Gainsborough's painting known as The Blue Boy. Those two treasures are only a small part of that already assembled at San Marino. But the important and new thing is that the Huntington Library, which its owner has recently made over to the public in fee simple and in perpetuity, is to be something infinitely greater and more important than a collection of literary or art oddities and uniques. As the latter, this collection is now well known to connoisseurs and experts all over the world. In spite of the money already invested by Mr. Huntington, his collection of pictures still falls short of some others both in extent and importance. Similarly, there are a few libraries of rare and first edition and manuscript volumes greater and more valuable, as for instance those of certain universities and that of the British Museum. But if Mr. Huntington had been purely a collector, with no definite plan or system in his acquisitive adventurings, he would still stand among the best and most successful in the world. So that there is kudos of that sort, enough and to spare. He is, on the contrary, probably the foremost in all the world, as a gatherer in one place, to which the scholarship of the world is invited and will continue to be, of paintings and books that will, when the project is carried to its logical conclusion, present in originals a purview of the world of painting and of literature and history. In short, Mr. Huntington's plans is to begin with the beginnings of such subjects as he has selected, and to go on until he has brought those subjects down to date. This is the big thing that the Huntington Library and art collection means. Mr. Huntington himself, to get the background first, is a man who inherited money and responsibilities and large opportunities from his uncle, the late Collis P. Huntington, one of the railroad pioneers of America. To his inherited wealth and power, he brought, and I don't know how to say this word, even though I've read it a million times, indefatigability. Okay, sorry. I know that's probably an easy word to pronounce. Indefatigability and business genius, and in the last 30 years he has greatly increased his fortune and his influence. He became a collector without purpose or plan, but as he increased his acquaintance with the works of art and letters and with other collectors, and became more and more in touch with scholars, libraries, curators, educators, and men of learning, a purpose shaped itself. He found, what we all know, that any man of sufficient means and prodigality, prodigality, as I've said in these episodes before, I don't think these were ever made to be read out loud. So if I make mistakes, forgive me. Not that you would judge me harshly, but you know what I mean. Okay, so back to Mr. Huntington. So he found what we all know, that any man of sufficient means and prodigality could buy original paintings and rare or unique books. There was in that avocation a certain thrill and satisfaction for itself. But being a businessman of peculiarly constructive and imaginative sort, he soon observed that this thrill and this satisfaction were pretty puerile things. To want a picture because it was talked of and cost a great deal, and to wade in and purchase it was as mechanical and prosaic as buying a corner lot. But to want a picture or a book because its possession would mean the completion of a link in a chain of purchases, which when completed would tie up into a constructive and culturally valuable series with no rival in the world, was more than an avocation. It was something as creative in nature and worth as the book he bought or the painting he coveted. To get exactly the significance of what Huntington's collecting came to be, let us take American history, one of his special subjects. By paying $1.2 million, he obtained the library of the late E. Dwight Church of Brooklyn, an immensely valuable and interesting one, intrinsically worth more even than the price paid. In that library, for example, is the original manuscript of Benjamin Franklin's autobiography. Not the first book printed, but the manuscript Franklin wrote with his own hand. As an item in a collection, that manuscript has an interest any layman can appreciate, the more so if he can have the privilege of holding it in his hand and perusing its faded lines with his imagination fired by the tremendous fact. But as Mr. Huntington's purpose grew, he found a new significance in the possession of that manuscript by adding to it documents, manuscripts, and rare books written or printed before and after Franklin's time. The Franklin script became part of a perfect entity, that is, the most complete available collection of the original sources of all American history. Already in pursuance of this project, the library contains 4 editions of the Letter of Columbus announcing the discovery of a new continent, all of them printed in 1493. Also 5 editions of the Novus Mundus of Americus Vespucius, giving accounts of his voyages, and 3 editions of, I'm not going to pronounce this well, Cosmographia Introductio, in which the first time the Christian name of Vespucius was employed to furnish the name of the new country. And beginning there, says Dr. Cole whimsically, we come down with a pretty complete chain to the point where we now have orders outstanding for a history of America that is not yet written. That, as regards American history, is the Huntington Project. As this purpose shaped, collecting became more than a hobby, a means of self-gratification. It became an intricate and complex business all by itself. Mr. Huntington himself had neither the foundation of scholarship nor the time to master so great a subject, but his trained intelligence could discern what knowledge was needed, and his money could engage the men who possessed that knowledge. The result was the beginning of a staff of experts, beginning with the late George D. Smith, who acted as his agent in many of his largest purchases, then with the addition of Dr. George Watson Cole, one of the most scholarly and expert librarians and bibliophiles in America, and later still by others until the present staff numbers some 14 men who are constantly at work in augmenting and cataloging the library alone. Meantime, Mr. Huntington's collection of paintings has been growing because of his interest in the world's best art, and because of his desire, which he has in common with his wife, to possess as many as possible of the masterpieces. There is not precisely the same plan in the art collection, but what it will represent when completed will be a wide and varied, if somewhat diffused, purview of the world of painting from the times of the earlier masters to comparatively recent days. The possession of 10 Romneys, 6 Gainsboroughs, originals from the times of the early Italians to the time of Monet, with, for example, and not to mention the widely heralded purchase of the Blue Boy, some 40 English portraits of the English school, and such a collection of etchings as very few galleries possess, entitles a man to consideration as a collector. The fact that most of these he chose himself, the fact that some of them he learned of and sought assiduously until they were his own, and the further fact that he knows the reasons for the intrinsic worth of all these works, these facts entitle Mr. Huntington to be considered as a connoisseur. He is very modest on this last point, very modest, in fact, deprecatory, but others press the distinction upon him. To catalogue either the books or the paintings Mr. Huntington has acquired would be an endless employment of space. Is it enough to say that his investment in pictures runs past $5 million, and in books twice that sum? Originally, these treasures were housed in the Huntington home in New York City, but most of his fortune had been made in Southern California. He was and is an ardent lover of its country and its people, and he there owns a magnificent estate and residence. Eventually, therefore, it was toward his country seat at San Marino, some 12 miles from Los Angeles, that he turned as the spot where he would build the treasure house for his prizes. The San Marino estate comprises 500 acres of the most beautiful and valuable foothill land of Southern California. For years, its owner had been improving it, first with a very complete and beautiful mansion, then with roads, walks, gardens, lawns, parks, preserves, fields, and outbuildings, and then with trees, ferns, shrubs, grasses, and flowers from all over the world, then with statuary, fountains, and art objects of rare nature and wide variety, almost everything that will grow in a temperate climate, and many plants that are unusually found only in the tropics are on the San Marino estate. Its beauty is beyond words, beauty of setting, beauty of plan, beauty of adornment. To say that it is one of the show places of America is to be conservative. Its value under the hammer of the auctioneer probably approaches $2.5 million. And this was in 1922. On high ground near the residence, Mr. Huntington built a permanent and fitting temple of art. A classic building, simple, chaste, imposing, and perfectly adapted at once to its purpose and to its surroundings. Into this he arranged to put the necessary mechanical devices for handling pictures and books, the lighting fixtures, the skylights, the book stacks, the filing cabinets, the bindery equipment, and so on and so on. Hundreds of thousands of dollars to get back to comprehensible terms again. Then with his priceless books and paintings, coming by the trainload with Dr. Cole as his librarian, developing a staff with the building being prepared, and with the plan working towards its end smoothly, without preliminaries and without strings, Mr. Huntington suddenly announced, within a few weeks now, his gift to the people of the whole estate, and all of its equipment with the library and art collection. Unquestionably, it is one of the most magnificent benefactions of all time. But aside from that, as an addition to the world's cultural centers, it is of value beyond comprehension or estimate. Only time can determine what it will come to mean to the scholarship and culture of America. The exact term of the trust are now known. A board of self-perpetuating trustees has already taken over the library building and sufficient ground to make the place convenient of access to the public, with all the art treasures in the library, and with a park in which lie a beautiful Japanese garden and a unique cactus collection, a magnificent gift in themselves. In addition, the board has accepted a considerable acreage, largely orange groves, which it may cultivate for the benefit of the trust or may sell. Finally, on the death of Mr. Huntington and of his wife, the board will automatically come into possession of the entire property, including everything. The art treasures are not, for the time being, accessible to the public. They are in the residence and, according to Mr. Huntington's wishes, will always remain there. That wing of the library building devoted to art will be used only for the housing of loaned collections and the like, but the plans for the development of this activity are not yet formulated. Work on the library is being pressed. Steel stacks for the accommodation of 2,500,000 volumes are now being built. In fact, almost completed. The drawings for the furnishing of the reading room, seminar rooms, and places for special collections or purposes are already made, and some of the necessary furniture ordered. Meantime, in one wing, Dr. Cole and his staff are working steadily to have the whole library ready for use at the earliest moment. As an indication of the open-handedness of the donor and of the earnest purpose of Dr. Cole, it may be said that as fast as books, manuscripts, or documents are unpacked and listed, they are put on the temporary shelves and made accessible to the public. There is to be no waiting for a formal opening of indefinite date. If what one wants is there, one can walk in and use it. And already 30,000 or 40,000 volumes are in place. The whole library comprises about 120,000 volumes and documents, and that total is being daily increased by new purchases. And I will just add that in these days, not just anyone can come in and get a book off the shelf. It is open to scholars from around the world. So there are some rules in place about who gets to use the library, but they are still contributing in a profound way to what is available. So I'll continue reading. As a medium for opening to universities, learned societies, and scholars everywhere, inaccessible treasuries of rare or unique books, there is a new process made an integral part of the Huntington Library plan of the utmost importance. A complete photostat plant has been installed in the building, and by paying the comparatively nominal cost of the work, anyone may procure a facsimile copy of any page or series of pages, or book or edition of books, or a manuscript or document of any kind or nature which is in the Huntington collection. I mean, that's pretty cool and ahead of its time for sure. This means that the scholar in Assyria is able to share with the scholar at the University of California or in the San Marino Public School the valuable privilege of examining original documents and going to original sources without the interposition of editors or publishers or translators. For example, the library is now engaged in preparing for Oxford University photostat copies of 3 volumes published by the Oxford Press 3 or 4 centuries ago, which the University of Oxford does not possess, but which Mr. Huntington has acquired. By interchanges of this character, moreover, the Huntington Library will presently have added to its originals photostat copies of unique or rare books it does not have, but which others do. It is difficult to realize that original manuscripts and first editions of letters and books of men long dead are in existence today. Little imagination is required to experience the thrill of touching the pages of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, penned by a scribe soon after his death, of 4 letters written by King George III, in which he acquiesces in the project to grant independence to the American colonies, of pages written by Washington and Jefferson, Franklin's autobiography already mentioned, the journal of Major John Andre, and the letters of Benedict Arnold, of books as they came from the presses of the 16th century, and of books made as gifts far back in history, such as a prayer book given his daughter Margaret, wife of James IV of Scotland, by King Henry VII of England, and so on. The tale runs endlessly. Dr. Cole calls attention to a significant fact in this connection. Because of the Great War and its effect on the fortunes of many ancient English families, there have been offered for sale in the last 5 or 6 years libraries and art objects or collections theretofore considered sequestered for all time. Mr. Huntington has profited by those conditions, and through him the world of scholarship. For example, he purchased in 1917 the Bridgewater House Library, founded in the reign of Queen Elizabeth by Sir Thomas Egerton, and that would be Queen Elizabeth I. Those who succeeded to the possession of the estate added to the wealth of this collection. The war came, and the exigencies of the times compelled the present family to dispose of its proud acquisition. Some conception of the extent of the Huntington Library and of its importance as a unit of original sources may be derived from the fact that Dr. Cole, the librarian, spent years preparing an index of the library of the late E.D. Church, which is printed in 7 larger volumes, and that Mr. Huntington brought the church library as a whole, together with those of William Howe, Frederick Halsey, and Beverly Chew, and large selections from the equally famous libraries of Robert Hoe, Thomas J. McKee, and Henry M. Poor, and 4 or 5 libraries, or large parts thereof, of ancient English families. As far as American history is concerned, it is doubtful if there is a more complete collection in any other one library, and the English literature treasury compares most favorably with any outside of a few public museums or libraries, national in ownership. This is the Henry E. Huntington Library and Art Gallery, with its costly permanent home and rich surroundings. And then it just ends with yours, exclamation point. So just a few reflections on that. Isn't it amazing that he had this vision and the means to see it through, to create this incredible repository of art and literature and wisdom that is still present today? One of the other things about the Huntington that I was thinking about, to go there you have to make parking reservations because they have a limited number of parking spaces. And that is one of the reasons that if you do go visit the Huntington, it is almost never crowded because it is hundreds of acres. The number of guests that they let in at any one time is limited. It's not that it's a hot ticket and you can't get in, so that's not what I mean. But for instance, if you want to go to Muir Woods up here in the Bay Area, you make parking reservations because they have a limited number of parking spaces. And so I seem to recall that that's the way you buy tickets or something. They limit the number of tickets or parking spaces. I don't know, maybe you don't need parking reservations, but anyways, there's a limited number of spots that they open up each day for people to go in. At least that's how I recall it. If I'm getting that wrong, my apologies. The thing that does stand in my mind, though, is how it never felt crowded. Even if we went on a Sunday when everybody was there, there was more than enough room for everyone. You know, it's not like you go to Disneyland and you're bumping into other people. The other thing I remember is how absolutely enchanted I would always be by the books and the literature they would have on display in the library section. So it's not a library like your local library where you go and take a book off the shelf. That kind of access, my understanding is it's limited to scholars. But they would have behind glass different volumes and letters displayed, and you could look at them. And I just found it fascinating to be able to look at something that was written in the 1500s. And I would always spend the most time in that wing. I just always found that enchanting because remember, I first went before there was the internet. You know, now we have this thing called the World Wide Web and Google Books and all of these other projects that make all of this stuff available. But this is way before that was an option for us. So if you go to Southern California, make some time for the Huntington Library and Gardens. And the high tea is awesome. It's really beautiful there. And it has a special place in my heart. And you know what? I have some other articles I can read in another episode. And you know what? I thought I would go to their website and pull this up about visiting because I wasn't sure about the parking. So this is what it says. It's open 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day, but it's closed on Tuesdays. Capacity is limited daily. Weekend reservations are required. There are no walk-ins, and reservations are strongly recommended for weekdays. So for adults, it's $25 on weekdays to go in, $29 on weekends. If you're over 65, there is a senior rate. There's also a military and student discount. Also, children under 4 are free. You can become a member. And they are closed on certain holidays, and parking is free. So I guess you make the reservation to enter. And they said beginning April 1st, free valet assist parking, also known as stack parking, will be used to maximize available parking spaces at the Huntington during peak weekend times. So there you go. So make your reservations ahead of time. I loved going to the Huntington so much. I will also say if you go to bring water, I don't know if they allow you to bring it. I think they do. But I remember always wanting a water bottle with me. Regarding dining, they do have like a coffee shop. You're not allowed to bring outside alcoholic beverages. Oh my gosh, and the Rose Garden Tea Room is currently closed for renovations, opening spring 2023. So perhaps by the time you go, the tea room will be open again. I loved the tea room, although I wouldn't really be able to eat there now, but loved it. So it's opening on May 24th. So perhaps by the time you hear this episode, it'll already be open. That was the first place I ever had high tea. I didn't know what high tea was. And ever since going there, I have been a fan of high tea. I think it was one of the first places I ever had a scone with clotted cream. And I tried. Anyways, I'm not going to get into food. You know me. I could talk about that for another hour. But anyways, that's the Huntington Library and Gardens, one of the most enchanting places I've ever been. And I'm glad to be able to share this with you. This is just, to me, perfect fodder for falling asleep and resting and replenishing. So my beautiful friend, I wish you love. I am so deeply grateful for you. We'll visit again soon. So thank you and blessings to you.